But one of the things pretty much all the speakers have focused on, that has been focus for everyone, is that think about what you really love and that one idea that you really believe in, and then do that one idea. I think I really want to focus, I guess my goal is to remind you to be really optimistic in a very complex world. Allison talked about how the issues and kind of the state of the universe are overwhelming, and they are, but we need to be optimistic. So my one idea, pretty much that I've based my life on, is that I believe that the fashion industry can be better for the world and can help people instead of hurting them, and can help the environment instead of hurting it. So my ideals are, one, I have two basic ideals. One is that I'm an optimistic person. I believe that we are capable of solving the world's greatest problems, from poverty to environmental degradation to lack of education and beyond. I believe it is each of our responsibility to take personal and collective action to solve these problems. And my other ideal is I really believe in craft and beauty. And I've struggled with this a lot, but because fashion is often seen as an industry that is kind of embodies consumerism and elitism and is very superficial, but fashion is also how we express ourselves, and it expresses who we are, what we want to be, our desires. Everybody on this earth wears fashion or clothing. I use fashion more than I use the word clothing, though a lot of people who work in kind of the environmental space have told me to never use the word fashion because it turns people off, but to me it's kind of interchangeable. So I think Greenpeace recently reported that there are 80 billion garments produced every year, which is 11 for every person on Earth. It's a lot of clothes. And over the past year, I run a nonprofit called Global Action Through Fashion. We do sustainability education. And I pretty much put my project with the nonprofit on hold to work for a clothing company in Los Angeles, where I managed production for a small company that did really high-end clothes. And there I dressed a lot of women in Hollywood, and not only made clothes for them, but actually physically undressed them and put them in clothes. And it was really incredible for me to watch the transition and kind of how a really incredible outfit can totally empower someone and make them feel good about themselves. So I do think fashion is important. And so when I talk about the fashion industry being complex, it is extremely complex. The way that we consume, buy, and manufacture clothes is completely out of control. Fashion impacts the environment and people throughout its entire life cycle, from production of raw materials to turning that material into a fiber, to dyeing it, to weaving it, to sewing it, to selling it, to consuming it, and then to disposing it. The impact is enormous. I started my journey in sustainable fashion with fair trade, and the clothing industry hires millions of producers around the world, but the reality of that is that many of them are enslaved. And I wanted to use an example of last week. I don't know if you guys saw in the news, there was a factory fire in Bangladesh that produced clothes for Walmart, among others. And it killed 123 people and 200 more were injured. The same thing happened last year in a factory where Gap, among others, produced clothes. And it just highlights, a lot of us think of cheap fashion as coming from China, but Bangladesh is actually the second largest manufacturer of clothing in the world. It makes up about 80% of their exports. And it's about a third of the price. People in Bangladesh the minimum wage is around $37 a month. So think about that compared to the cost of one sweater that you'll be buying that's manufactured there. It's about a third of the price to manufacture something in Bangladesh than it is in China. So human rights abuses are rampant, and there isn't a lot of oversight or monitoring. Another big problem is that a lot of clothing companies don't own their own factories. So Walmart's saying we're not responsible. We had agreements. We regulate and audit our factories every year, but they don't actually own their factories. So it's hard for us to know what's in our clothes or in our food and what's going on, but a lot of companies don't even know what's in their clothes. So the system is not very transparent. And in terms of environmental impact, just to give an example, 80% of fabric in the world is made of either conventional cotton or polyester. Conventional cotton uses more chemicals and pesticides than any other single crop on the planet. And it's also incredibly water intensive. So even if you do buy organic cotton, which is a great alternative, it still uses a huge amount of water. And polyester is a petroleum product. It's the most widely used fiber there is, and it's a non-renewable resource. So I wanted to talk about kind of with all of this complex, overwhelming industry, how do we make change? So personally, I worked in fair trade fashion, and I started my nonprofit Global Action Through Fashion. With the nonprofit, we're working on a documentary film, which I think will be the most powerful tool for us to communicate to consumers in a fun way the issues behind fashion. So I've been working on that for a couple years, and I'm really excited about it. I'm also working on a documentary, a database for designers. As someone who's sewn and made things for a long time, I've done tons of research into where can I find sustainable fabrics? What are the design techniques I can use as a designer? And there are no resources for designers. There's no one resource. It's very difficult to find out what alternatives are as a designer. So we're also working on that database. There are a couple exciting things that have happened in the last month that I thought I'd share with you that show individual kind of taking action. One is United Students Against Sweatshops is a nationwide group with chapters at all different universities. Probably some of your universities have chapters. But recently Adidas, they found out they owed workers, I forget where, I think in Central America in one factory, they owed about $1.8 million in severance pay to their workers, and they were refusing to pay it. And War on Want and a whole bunch of labor rights organizations have been trying to campaign to get them to pay it. And United Students Against Sweatshops, all the different chapters, University of Washington's chapter, their school had a big agreement with Adidas and a lot of their sports equipment and school uniforms, and not uniforms, but just things that were like sweatshirts and exercise clothes were all through Adidas. And so the students formed groups and protested and reached out to the university president, and they cut off all ties with Adidas, which was really amazing. Super exciting for me. Greenpeace did tons of amazing research into the toxins that are in our clothing. They actually took clothes from stores, from 20 major retailers, and tested what was inside of them and found a ton of cancer-causing and highly toxic chemicals. And they've been they created a detox campaign and are trying to get those big companies to agree to eliminate those toxic chemicals by 2020. And Zara, who's the largest fashion retailer, has been their biggest campaign, and just this last week, Zara agreed. So that was really exciting. I think they got hundreds of thousands of signatures. So again, that's a campaign that was started by them, but has been joined by many. Olivia Firth, Colin Firth's wife, this last week was awarded the UN Leader of Change for 2012, which is a new award, and she started a challenge called the Green Carpet Challenge, where she convinced actresses essentially to wear green gowns on the red carpet to various events. And so it started off as a small project where she would wear them, but now she's been convincing other people to wear them. And she's been working with a company that sources all sustainable fabrics, and in the process, she's convinced really big companies like Valentino and Lanvin that gold Meryl Streep gown that she won the Oscar in it was made out of recycled plastic bottles. So she also created kind of starting from a personal. Of course, she had a high access to publicity, but really was able to create change and convince people through glamour. And I guess I wanted to hear, since we haven't heard a ton from you guys and a lot from other people about what their ideas are, I wanted to know if any of you wanted to share what your idea or passion was. If you guys like mine is fashion, but I wanted to hear what you guys are working on specifically, what you're most excited about.
Okay, so I'm really passionate about water. I want to be a hydrologist. But the Project Green Challenge, the Style Challenge, was actually what caused the biggest impact just something, like the clothing industry was something that I had never really been passionate about. And then all of a sudden I found myself being this huge advocate for something I had never really thought about. And thank you for this talk because it's really helped inspire me to continue doing that.
If anyone wants to do anything related to sustainable fashion, I've had a lot of amazing mentors and people who want interns or want to hire people. So if anyone has questions, I was talking to Izzy about natural dyes. So yeah, yes.
Are you willing to like work with universities that come to our schools and talk, get us involved? I mean, that's what students are really looking for, is how can we get involved? Not just like, oh, we'll listen to it, but really what we're looking for is how can we use our hands and go do these things?
Yeah, or did you repeat the beginning of the question?
Just how can we get involved? Like,
yeah, again, there are many ways. Like United Students Against Sweatshop launched their campaign that focused on just sorry, I'm a little over time, but focused just on, trying to get their university not to work in sweatshops. What's your major?
finance.
Finance. Okay. So I think just, again, find out what part of the fashion industry is like, or whether you want to focus on labor and environment and create a campus campaign